How are you today?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here and happy to discuss the leadership and crisis part.
Yeah, it's absolutely such a vital topic. Is there anything else before we jump into the questions here? Is there anything else you like? I read a little bit about your bio. Anything else you'd like to share about your background and your role at NGA?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you were reading, I have 19 years experience in DoD entities. That's either through the military, which I was a U.S. paratrooper down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, or into contracting, DoD contracting. And then from there, I went into government in 2013 as a federal civilian employee for NGA. My job background is primarily program management with IT focus, and I did geospatial. That's how I got into NGA in the Army. So coming to NGA, I have many different hats I like to say I wear, which is normal of NGA. You're not just doing what you were assigned to, you're going to do more than that, which allows you to collaborate with other folks that you across the agencies and different components, which is great for networking and building up your own career growth. So I've been a data scientist, I've been a data steward, I've been a program manager, I've been a product manager, many different work roles here at the agency, even in human resources. So it's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'd also like to take this moment to say thank you for your service, Christopher.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So let's jump into the topic here as we are discussing, leadership in crisis. So before we get to the crisis, how would you personally define leadership and what makes a good leader?
So that's a great question. There are many different aspects to leaders, and most time people think leader of supervision only. Leaders come in all different levels. It's not necessarily supervision. So even when I was in the Army, we had leaders at the lowest level because they need to be able to navigate mission, even if the senior NCOs or officers are not no longer around, right? So the way I treat my folks and my employees here at the agency is that they lead from all different levels, right? Um, so the biggest thing that I look at when it comes to leadership is the ability to do growth and the ability to empower folks to innovate. So those are my two moral, as you would call it, aspects to what uh, the most valuable part of what a leader is.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about some examples of crises that you've encountered in your career path, and how did you, Christopher, approach them as a leader?
Okay.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah. So um, looking back at just talking about this crisis that happened not too long ago, and we're just getting out of it, the COVID crisis. So in 2019, I think, or 2020, dates got fuzzy during the crisis. I ended up taking a new position, and some of my folks were just finishing up their training and coming to start their actual work at the agency as software developers. And as soon as they start, because they graduated their boot camp that they had to take for training in March, and then they started in March as well on their very first project, then boom, COVID hit. So we were unprepared. We didn't have a lot of resources to understand what we needed to do. We thought we were going to come back into the building and start working in within 2 weeks. We thought it was going to be a short thing. It did not turn out to be a short thing. It turned out to be a very long-term thing. So I had to think outside the box here. One of the biggest things that I had to overcome, especially in this crisis, and many leaders probably the same way, is the health and welfare of your employees, right? So the mental capacity of what your employee is going through. There's been many durations where I've encountered some of my employees who had lost loved ones due to the crisis, and how to navigate that, as well as ensure that the stuff that they're doing is still meeting the mission, right? So that's been a big challenge, is making sure that they understand and correlate, even with everything that's going on, that they're still able to hit their mission goals, as well as see themselves contributing and seeing those accomplishments. So that was my biggest part that I had to overcome, is how do I figure out how to navigate that approach? So I did it with one-on-one sessions And I held, and my one-on-one sessions were not just work related. Most of the time it was, how are you doing? Understanding how the employee's doing helps me understand how I can navigate their growth in their career, as well as provide them support for their personal.
I love that. So I love that you went right to the source there. You were doing one-on-one Q&A questions with your employees, seeing what's going on, so you could actually get in on the ground floor with them, as opposed to just making assumptions on what
Correct.
you thought needed to happen, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So can you speak to, you also mentioned how, as a lot of us were unprepared when this hit, we were told, we thought it was gonna be a couple weeks. It was not. It was a very long process. So there was a lot of learning as we went along, a lot of data gathering and
Mhm.
making adjustments, and then making more adjustments and more adjustments.
Yep.
So can you speak to, with all these opportunities, is one way to put it, for learning and adjusting, how did the pandemic, what roles has it played in developing your leadership skills and an approach to being a leader?
So it definitely hit the emotional intelligence aspect of the house during this crisis. Um, a lot of leaders, mission focused, product focused, program focused, right? Sometimes forgets that there's human elements to it. We're not all here for being worker bees. Yes, we have a job to do, but we're not drones. We're human beings and we do have emotions. So the biggest thing that I had to actually learn, which I actually took training for, was emotional intelligence, to build up my own leadership style and knowledge on how to navigate and work with my employees during this COVID pandemic. So that's one piece. The other piece was helping them learn their emotional intelligence so they can work with their teams. So the training I took, I provided to them as well through a contract that we procured, Udemy, and they were able to navigate some of their own uh, personal reviews, right, as well as being able to moderate and how they're going to work on teams. So I thought that was pretty good, but I would have never done this unless I was in this position.
What did some of that training, if you may share, what did some of that training look like? And do you have any little aha moments when you're like, oh, I can feel there's a shift happening for me in my understanding of my own emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so one of the things I liked and enjoyed the most of the training that I took was how to receive feedback and how to provide
Mm,
feedback. Um, I never thought of it in a way on how to receive feedback. I'm used to, hey, here's your feedback, blah, 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 right? No, it's how you receive feedback is very important because you want to know how you'd like to receive. So one of the questions I asked my employees during the pandemic, months in, mind you, as I was learning new processes and procedures on how to deal with things, was, how would you like to receive feedback? So during my one-on-one sessions, some folks like, just give me the nuts and bolts and that's all I want. Great. So I provide that in either writing format, how they would like it, or we've had our conversations and we would just talk casually. Some folks want to know how they're doing from an emotional standpoint, where I had one of my employees who was what we call self-doubt. They had a lot of self-doubt in their capabilities as a developer, primarily because they could not interact with people. And this person likes to be in groups. Well, the pandemic isolated everybody. So this individual was having a real hard time struggling. Their family was in a completely different state in the Midwest, and they didn't have anybody out here in the DC location. So one of the things that during my conversation with him is, I made sure that he understood the work that he completed, how it tied with mission through his feedback. And I wouldn't know that because receiving feedback is one of the things I need to work on, as well as giving feedback. So during that whole conversation, we found out that, he now understands how he was tying towards mission. He understood the work that he's doing and his contributions, and his self-doubt started to go away to where he actually became a really good software developer and was starting to train others.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, uh, I think, for myself, working on receiving feedback, that's a continual growth experience for me. And you identified that for yourself. Can you share with us a bit? Because I feel like this is something a lot of us are working on. What comes up for you in receiving feedback, and how have the tools helped you in receiving feedback?
So are you asking how I would receive feedback from my employees or from people, or could you elaborate a
Yeah,
little bit?
yeah, for sure. So if someone's giving you feedback, Christopher, for something that you're working on, or maybe you're asking for it from some employees on maybe your leadership skills or something like that, could you maybe compare how you received it before the training and now that you've had the training,
Ah,
where your feedback listening kicks in, and how has it changed?
yeah. So one of the things that I used to do is never receive feedback. I just
Well,
had
yeah.
I had folks, including my managers, my supervisors, when they would say, "Hey, Chris, I got some feedback for you." It's just the data points. That's all I care about. I don't care about anything I'm doing well. I want to know what I'm doing wrong, right? That
Uh-huh.
was my way, but I've never communicated that. So a part of this training is understanding receiving feedback is active listening. And that was a hard problem for me because NGA employs a diverse group of many different backgrounds, many different ethnicities, et cetera, right? So I'm ADHD, and ADHD sometimes keeps moving without realizing it, and it's hard to stop to listen. So this was extremely hard for me. I had to actually learn how to listen. So part of the things that I did as a mechanism to actively listen was to sit there and engage in the conversation. So a lot of folks know just sit back and listen. My part for learning was engagement. So the communication aspect was huge for me to understand everything about my employees and how they view me and where I can actually grow into learning about everything that they need so I can provide them actionable feedback to grow as well.
Oh, that's so helpful to hear, the engagement aspect for you, because that, and I love too how you identified your data points kind of person. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I did all that great. Yeah, but what's the problem here? Like, what can I fix? What needs improvement there? And that is important, perhaps, in receiving feedback. But I love that you have been able to grow in this way, because it's inspiring to me, of the active engagement in your listening, because it really does put you in the conversation, right? And it
Hmm.
can help you hear things maybe a little bit clearer, huh?
Yes, indeed,
Yeah.
definitely. And allows me to definitely engage with them in a way that they like. So that's the huge
Mm,
takeaway there is how can I help them grow? That's my whole background, how to help you grow.
I love that. So I imagine, with how can I help you grow as your one of your core, it sounds like one of your core values, one of your
Hmm.
core, yeah, commitments here. So I imagine in that container that contains empathy, right? So how
Hmm.
does empathy play into being a strong leader, especially in a crisis?
So, like I was alluding earlier, during the pandemic, there were some folks who lost loved ones, and I did have an employee who did lose somebody that was close to him. Sorry, give me 1 second. My phone's beeping. I should have put it on silent.
All good. Very popular man, very people
There we
need
go.
you,
It's on
Chris.
silent. Sorry about that.
All good. No problem.
Um, okay, yeah. So I had an employee who actually lost a loved one, and understanding how they were feeling and the things that they're going through will affect how they're going to perform, right? So what I did was, I provided support as much as possible on a personal level, more so than I did on their actual work level. And the reason for it is because I want this employee to know that we care and that I understand or sympathize what they're going through and can be there for them whenever they need, right? So I gave them max flexible schedules, allow them to go do whatever they need, work from their location in which where they had to travel to when they wanted to. And then as I said, and have constant communication, personal level for about a couple of months before we went back into the work role type conversations. Because I wanted to make sure my employees were good mentally and had the support so they could actually come back to work and perform to do the mission because it's a two part, it's persons and mission that we have, right? And they're connected. They're not one over the other. It's equal, in my opinion. So that's what I did to showcase, and empathy is a vital role in leadership.
And how does it show up in communication? Active listening, engagement? What other ways does empathy show up in communication?
So, I mean, you could see it from the facial expressions. You can see it from, just basic conversation, nothing, casual conversation like we're having right now. And then it's just the active listening part and understanding and letting the person vent. And that part plays a huge role, especially in crises like this, right? On the other hand, let's just say I had an employee like the one I was talking about earlier who had the self-doubt part. That was and that was correlated towards work. So understanding why they felt that way and understanding through active listening and conversation and engagement allowed me to figure out a way to help them improve. And the way I did that the way I worked that situation was through training, through on the spot correction, providing more feedback to this individual in the way that they like to receive it, giving them an understanding of self-belonging to this organization and how they're tying it back to the mission was a big way to help them see themselves grow personally. And to be honest, this employee, thanked me many, many times for all the opportunities, and he did leave the agency and he's in a different spot, and I actually helped him find a different spot because he wanted to be close to his family. So it's not just me trying to retain, even though we like to retain folks. I like to see you grow regardless where you go, and keep that networking and to see how you're thriving even after you're gone.
I love that. And you never know, maybe they'll come back,
Mhm.
it's keeping that healthy relationship alive. And I just love that for you, it's seeing these people grow on whatever paths that they want to walk down. I think that's just
Correct.
wonderful.
Yep.
So you spoke to, for this person in this example, their sense of belonging in the organization. And that also, I feel, ties into trust.
Mhm.
So how can folks build trust on their teams, especially during a crisis, whether it's a global one or maybe it's a localized one to the org?
That's a great question as well. I mean, trust comes in both ways, right? It's receiving and providing trust, right? So for my employees, I want them to know, I think I'm a trustworthy person. How do I prove that? Is by actively showing them that I want them to succeed, actively going out there and making sure that they have the tools necessary to succeed. It's not necessarily being, what I call a micromanager. That's the opposite of demonstrating trust, in my opinion, for a leader. So mine is more understanding the emotional state as well as understanding their capabilities and tying those two together to showcase and demonstrate that I'm providing you as much innovation, creativity that you would like without the fear of failure. And that's actually my one of my speeches that I give to all my employees when they come on board to my organization is I'm here to watch you grow, watch you create, watch you innovate, get away from the fear of failure. Yeah, you're going to fail. I mean, a lot of people fail. It's how you overcome those failures that is where it makes you grow into a better developer, better analyst, a better person. So that's one thing, is understanding that I gave them that capability, that demonstration of caring, and that understanding of trust that I have in them, that I'm instilling into them. That's how I was able to receive their trust back to perform well. And for me, it's about how well are they as a person growing with their looking at a growth mindset capability. How well are they innovating and finding solutions that maybe we didn't have, because they're able to speak up now instead of just holding that back in because of the fear of what people are going to do that weighs big on people. So that's one aspect of trust. And then in return, I'm getting trust back because they're completing mission, they're inventing, they're innovating, they're growing the organization based on what they're just doing as a normal person in their job.
It's fantastic because I feel like there's a sense of many folks in the workplace, and it can happen for me too, of this this perfectionism quality. We want to make sure we do everything right. We want to look good. We want to impress our boss, our colleagues, whatever. But all of those things are actually can be distractions, and they are based in fear, like you're saying. So ego could be in there too, and if you're getting permission and you feel that level of trust with your colleagues, with your leaders, that it's just a lot of energy that we're spending on being afraid. It's a lot of just like throwing coal on an empty fire. Like it's just wasted fuel, right? So you're able to use that energy and that fuel and that trust to be innovative and excited. And, maybe you're going to fail. And that's okay. You're not going to get fired, like
Right.
you're experimenting, you're trying something, you're figuring your own way out. Like you said, when you listen to people, everyone works a little differently. There's every puzzle piece is different, right? And
Correct.
Finding that trust is it's a gift, I think, honestly, for a lot of folks. So kudos to you to continue to foster that dynamic there.
And I'm still learning. So I learn from my own mistakes, because I too fail sometimes, and when I have to learn from them.
Yeah. There's a phrase that I that I embrace, which is complete and continue.
Oh, that's a nice phrase. I'm gonna steal that.
I offer it up. I didn't write it. Someone else had a different version and I tweaked it a little bit, and that's my take. So it's all yours, Chris. If it's helpful, use it. Complete and continue, and that's it. Kind of can segue into our next question too, which is, taking the look back, right? Let's take stock, so let's say the crisis is resolved. Obviously the global one is not. It is changing. I wouldn't say it's resolved right now, but it's changing. But let's say there's a crisis that was resolved within the company, within a mission. What steps should leaders take to reflect back and then move forward?
So that's great as well. So we did perform our reflection pros and cons. It's not just me, right? So it's multiple people to get together in order to see what's valuable and what's not, right? So in my organization, all the leaders got together, and by leaders in this definition, I mean supervisors and managers got together, and we took notes. We took lessons learned from each of the different perspectives from each of the supervisors and managers, and we jotted them down and we weighed the pros and cons of them. One of the things that we found, and this is not just the agency, this is all over, telework was a huge benefit to people, right? Giving them the freedom to be able to navigate their personal life as well as meet the mission or work the jobs that they had to perform. And giving them the trust to do that was a huge win in our situation, because it allowed them to be freely and develop whenever they needed to develop, when they had the free time to do so, or the time that they had to do so without having to care for loved ones. So that was a big plus in our way. The other one was, training. We found that our training, which is mainly internal and it's at an organization, was not working. That's why we looked for virtual type training. And that was a huge lesson learned, to allow people to continue learning on a virtual platform and performing to their job. So in software development, we're always learning because technology is always changing. So that was a huge benefit that we brought into play as well. Some of the things that we learned that wasn't, and that we could improve on, is always understanding the emotional intelligence. That's a big piece there, and how to navigate that aspect is a huge thing that we all have to learn and continue to learn. And there's been a couple of us that had faults, and I'm not saying I'm the best, because I don't pretend to be the best, but even myself, I had to go through years, because it was 3 years, right, of learning these aspects and changing and evolving and reading back with leaders, telling what I learned, what I didn't like, right? Those are the things that we took into play as part of a reflection, but you're reflecting constantly.
It's so important. And I'm curious, Chris, for looking back, you've been taking stock, and you do it for yourself as a leader, you do it as a group, you do your look backs. If you could go back, let's say, we could go back 3 years if you want, or we could go further back when you were starting your career. What piece of advice would you give yourself to become a better leader?
The most important one, active listening. I can't tell you how good that, I wish I'd known that even when I was in the military. The military mindset is do as I do. or do as I say. How you ever say it is more like it.
Right.
But when you
Yeah.
hit the certain rank, it's do as I say, right? And
Mhm.
soldiers just follow through. This is an order that my commander gave me or my NCO gave me. Follow through. Um, I wish I had the active listening part down because that took me a long time to learn. Um, Years. I would say over 19 years to learn. So
Yeah. Well, that's thank you so much for making the time, Christopher. This has been so wonderful. For folks that want to keep the conversation going with you and NGA, is there anything that you can share with us for connecting and keeping the conversation going?
yes, absolutely. So if you guys all like to continue the conversation with me, I will provide my email address for you all so you guys can, reach out to me. I don't know. Do I give that to you, Hunter, or?
Yeah, you can drop it in the chat here, and our facilitators, our wonderful team, will drop it into the live stream chat so everyone there can connect with you. And also, friends, you can also check out. Yep, there it is. So he's dropping it in the email there. And are you on LinkedIn as well? Is that a good
I
way
am
to
on
reach
LinkedIn.
out?
Yep. I don't have my profile here. I can look it up and put it also in the chat for you all. So in the event that you need to see me on there, so you can link in with me as well on LinkedIn if you need to. Um, yeah, I think those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. Phone calls, I would
Awesome.
say, but I kind of, screen my phone calls.
I think that's wise, Chris. I think that's very wise. There's a lot of robocalls out here these days, so I respect and support that. Well, thank you so much for making the time today. Thank you for your active listening and your participation, your engagement, your wise words. I really appreciate you making the time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thanks.